The salmon was dry. That was the first thing I noticed as Mom placed the platter in the center of the table, between the chipped blue plate holding a limp heap of asparagus and a basket of bread hunks gone stiff at the edges. I speared a piece, chewing as the flavors muddied together: lemon, overcooked flesh, regret. My tongue worked at a tiny bone hidden beneath the layers. I looked up. Around the table, the familiar faces wore a Sunday night glaze. Half attention and half exhaustion from whatever corners of their lives they dragged here. Uncle Ray cleared his throat and set his fork down with a deliberate clink. "So, Matthew," he began, stretching my name out like he could taste it, "how's the grand plan these days?" He hooked 2 fingers into air quotes, eyes narrowing as if it were some foreign dish we'd been forced to try. I felt the weight of my father's silence. Mom's eyes darted between us, her worry a living thing that vibrated in the lines at the edges of her mouth. My younger sister, Bree, glanced over and lifted her brows, barely hiding her smirk. "It's good, Uncle," I said, steadying my hands against the table. "I'm working on my portfolio. Applications are going out next week." That was the script. I'd practiced it for nights, letting it slip into conversation with practiced nonchalance. But here? Under harsh ceiling lights flickering off the gold trim of plates bought 20 years ago, it felt exposed. The silence stretched, pulling at my resolve. Dad grunted. "Remind me again, what's wrong with engineering or teaching?" He didn't look at me when he asked. His gaze was on a knot in the placemat, fingers tracing the weave. "There's nothing wrong with them," I said. "They just aren't for me." "Architecture's always, I just don't understand," Bree chimed in. "No one makes a living drawing pretty buildings anymore. Vancouver's impossible. Rent's bad enough, and you want to start at the bottom?" She made a face, scrunching her nose like she'd caught a whiff of rot. Uncle Ray found his cue. "Look," he said, slicing his fork into the salmon. "When I was your age, I worked real jobs, poured concrete over in Richmond. None of this fantasy stuff. You want to build things? Do it with your hands." Mom reached for her glass, fingers tight around its rim. "Ray, it's not the same. Architect is, well, it's not for people like us," he cut in. "Let's be honest." In that moment, the distance between us yawned open, me clutching my hope, everyone else guarding their doubts. Stuffing my disappointment under the table, I found my words slipping quieter, but more deliberate. "Just wait," I managed. "I'll show you." The rest of dinner unspooled in jabs and small talk, the conversation circling over what seemed safe. Bree's classes, Ray's construction gripes, neighborhood gossip. Around me, their words faded into a muffled drone, broken only by the occasional scrape of cutlery. I watched the shadows twitching against the walls. For the rest of the night, a single thought hammered in my chest, growing sharper with each heavy breath. I needed to leave. In the weeks that followed, their voices attended me like a second skin, doubt and condescension woven into every consultation, every late-night sketch. Days working at the hardware store ran into evenings hunched over tracing paper, my hands shaping lines and angles under the pale bulb of my desk lamp. Vancouver's rain battered the window behind me, the hiss and drum masking my fatigue. I filled out applications. Even as I pressed send for that first architecture program at UBC, I could hear Ray's laughter. "You know how many kids dream about this, Matt? 100 to 1 they ever break in." Each rejection, "Thank you for your interest, unfortunately, we regret," landed on me as confirmation. The day I got accepted, no one was home. I sat in the kitchen, knuckles white around the edge of the letter, chest hollow. There were no cheers or tears, only the sound of rain hammering down. The sizzle of the neighbor's shower through the vent. For a week, I carried that acceptance in my backpack, letting the paper crease and soften like something I had to earn. School was another proving ground. The studios held jangly energy ideas, swirling in caffeine-sick air, everyone clawing for the chance to make something that would last. My classmates zipped through modeling programs while I struggled to afford a second-hand laptop. Sometimes I lingered outside the glass towers downtown, jaw set as I watched architects in iron shirts stream out, laughing into the sound of honking horns and rushing buses. I rarely came home. When I did, I fielded the same tight-lipped accommodations from Dad. "You eating enough?" and sidestepped Ray's barbs about starving artists. Bree was gone most weekends, floating to parties and shifting degrees. Mom watched me with a subtle ache, pride tangled with fear. Money got lean. My fingers stiffened from shoveling gravel in summer. I sewed up my only pair of work slacks with cheap thread. I ate microwaved rice until the smell made me dizzy. My first commission came through a professor, an elderly woman renovating her laneway house, budget thin and plans vague. I scraped by, peering through building code PDFs and sleeping rough estimates. My drawings were rough, but I delivered on time. When I graduated, my diploma folded into a letter-sized envelope on my desk, and my job offer, a junior associate at a small local firm, arrived sticky with uncertainty. I pressed forward, learning the city from ground up, inhaling wet cedar at job sites, elbows brushing developers in glass conference rooms. Sometimes, walking past the South Main construction sites, I felt a strange hunger. The urge to build something that would outlive the doubts. Years ground past. Promotions came slow, mistakes expensive. I lived on instant coffee and hope. Friends peeled away, drifting to Alberta or Toronto or out of the field entirely. My own voice, stripped down by the city's indifference, grew quieter and more precise. But slowly, things shifted. The city began talking about affordable housing, green spaces, spaces that didn't just shelter, but belonged. I won a local design competition. With that slim wedge of recognition, I pitched the city council a community-led housing project, sustainable, modular, built for families like mine on lower incomes. They balked at first. Who was I, this kid from East Van proposing plywood dreams? But I had plans, renderings, and the steady pulse of everything I'd bottled since that night at the family table. I found allies. The mayor's assistant liked my numbers. The local paper ran a story about a new homegrown visionary. I still caught whispers. "He's just lucky. One off. Let's see him finish." But the pieces fit together. 3 years later, the project neared completion. A mix of low-rise apartments around a green courtyard, rain gardens draining the Vancouver sky, wood and glass shaped to welcome in light and warmth. My firm's sign hung on a banner near the entrance. East Crescent Homes, Matthew Lynn, architect. My name in print. Concrete proof. That spring, the city called for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. "Bring your family," the coordinator said. "It's a big deal." I hesitated at first, panic crackling through the pride. But I thought of that cracked porcelain dinner table, of Uncle Ray's laugh, Dad's disappointment, Bree's theatrical eye rolls. It was time. I called Mom first. "They're inviting families to the opening," I said, heart racing even as I kept my voice calm. "Would you all want to come?" There was a pause, the kind that feels like falling. "Of course, honey," she said. "We'll be there. I'll tell your father and Bree, and Ray's in town this week. He'd want to see too." I could hear the hesitation behind the eagerness, her wanting to be proud, scared of how it might go. I understood. The morning of the ceremony, the city felt scrubbed clean by last night's rain. Sun crackled on leaves, the air sharp with the promise of spring. I woke early, pulling on my one good suit, hands trembling as I straightened my tie in the dusty mirror. I walked through the site before anyone arrived. The grass between the buildings was still slick, and I could smell the faint tang of new lumber. Children's chalk scribbles from the local daycare looped across the walkways. Above, windows caught the pale Vancouver light, each one promising something new. Soon, the site teemed with activity: press, developers, local officials. Neighbors, I stationed myself near the entry, heart hammering as I scanned the growing crowd. Then I saw my family. Mom smoothing her hair anxiously, Dad stiff in his khakis, Bree distractedly texting, Ray walking with deliberate swagger. They hesitated at the line of planters, staring up at the building. My name glimmered on the sign above the door. The city councilwoman finished her speech, something about community and renewal, and before I knew it, they were waving me forward for the ribbon cutting. The giant scissors shook in my grip and cameras flashed. After the applause, people surged forward, wanting to tour the buildings. I spanned the crowd. My family was hanging back, uncertain, out of place among the developers and city workers. I crossed to them. Mom smiled nervously, her eyes glossy. "It's beautiful, Matthew." Dad cleared his throat. "Looks big." He shrugged in a way that tried to cover pride with indifference, but his eyes kept flicking up, taking in the scale. I saw his shoulders loosen, just a little. Ray hovered by the sign, brow furrowed, reading my name. "You really did this?" I nodded, words caught behind my teeth.